Well done, good and faithful leader. You serve faithfully day by day. You are a pillar of strength to many. You are a hero, commander-in-chief of the land of the brave. Man on a mission, carrying a unique vision, inspiration, hero to the nation. We say, Omake, well done.
President Geingob's tenure saw various initiatives which were aimed at empowering and uplifting the youth of Namibia. This afternoon, we're honored to have the current Vice President of the Namibia National Students Organization, that is Luciano Kambala, as well as Madame Ester, former NANSO President, to speak to us about the life and legacy of the late Dr. Hage Geingob. Good afternoon and welcome to this special tribute broadcast.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Demba. Thank you for having us.
Yes, the nation is still reeling in shock, and we're focusing this afternoon particularly on President Geingob's role and involvement in uplifting young people. In broad strokes, Esther, before we get into the particulars, how would you describe the involvement, the support of the late Dr. Geingob as far as young people are concerned?
Thank you very much, Denver. And I can't even find the right words to contextualize that, because as Namibian young people, we're privileged to have a president who was very consultative, who believed in the power of young people, and who ensured that if any opportunity given, he would engage us, he would involve us, and he would make sure that young people also were part of his leadership. He would listen to us in terms of what is our position on key issues. What are the young people saying? And he just doesn't listen. He also makes sure that our contribution and our input is part of the work that he's doing. So he listened attentively, but he also ensured that what we would contribute was part and parcel of the work that he would do. So we lost an icon, a statement like many have described him, a mentor to many, but most importantly, a believer in the potential and capacity of young people. Yeah.
Luciano, what is your take?
I must agree with Esther. I think she covered most of it, but also just to add that we lost somebody who really gave meaning to meaningful youth participation. Meaningful youth participation in decision-making, meaningful youth participation in processes and ensuring that his legacy was also guided and taken forward by the vision that young people also had for our country.
Yeah.
What are we to understand about and with meaningful youth participation in that context?
In that young people were not just asked to come, but to participate, be heard, be listened to, be guided, but also contribute, and their contributions were heard and implemented where the need was able to accommodate it. So it wasn't just tokenism or bringing young people to this decision-making table for the sake of having a young person there or for the sake of having young people there. It was really to listen, to engage, and to implement what young people are saying.
Yeah.
Yes, I think what Luciano is saying is not without significance. We very often hear of workspaces, even in formalized work-integrated learning spaces where young people or those doing internship are asked to make tea or make photocopies, where there's no such meaningful youth participation. Would you like to add perhaps to what that means within context?
Yes, thank you, Denver. And I would want to draw back to 2019 when President Geingob appointed the high-level panel, which was a group of advisors tasked to advise the president on how to revive the Namibian economy. I was fortunate enough at the time, I was 24 years of age, and President Geingob gave me the opportunity to serve on the high-level panel. Now, what that panel did, it was one of the advisory committee that also looked into internship of students, which was a contribution from the side of NANSO, because at the time I was spearheading the organization as the president, where we felt that as students, young people are complaining to us quite often that yes, they are required to, by curriculum, to do internship, but they are not really being considered. You are there trying to put what you're taught in theory into practice, but at the end of the time, you end up doing coffee, you end up doing copies. But then what happened is that there was then a submission from the high-level panel to change that, and it was contextualized. We started seeing a radical transformation change on how internship was happening, but also the issue of stipends that came with internship, which was by effort of the high-level panel, but also because President Geingob enabled the student voice to take center stage in also advising through that process. Just to contextualize once more around radical engagement or moving away from tokenism, we've seen that President Geingob is just not only praised within our country, but at continent and also the global level, where firstly when he took office, we saw that he was the first to appoint a youth advisor in his private office. He continued throughout his committees where he was appointing advisors, regional governors. President Geingob made sure that even in that highest decision-making structures, he ensured that young people also have space. So we've also seen appointments of deputy ministers who now have related to ministers. That's the legacy of President Geingob.
It's a big deal.
A big one.
Yeah.
And that's something that we will have to remember him forever, that he really believed in the potential and capacity of young people. And he gave us the platform. He listened attentively. And he also ensured that when young people advise, he takes it into his policies, it's taken into work.
Yeah. That brings me to my next question, Luciano. Thank you, Esther. Young people, especially you millennials, are not known for mincing your words. Straight talk is the order of the day, but certainly the Geingob administration was receptive to such straight talk. What's your take on how receptive the president was as far as young people being allowed to show up as their authentic selves and speak, of course, with respect, but with straight talk?
Yeah, I think that reminds me of the shut it all down movement. I mean, the language that the movement was using, or that most of us who were on the streets were using,
was not always family friendly.
Yes.
Yeah, and can't be repeated on this platform, for instance.
No. Yes, definitely. But President Geingob said, he reached out and he said, you people, you young people have a problem. What is the problem? Come to State House. I want to engage you. I was one of the people who helped organize that meeting through Daisry, and then also engaging the leaders of the protest to say, look, President has reached out. He's saying, what is the problem? He wants to understand where we are coming from. He wants government to hear us. So he said, come to State House. I'm going to make sure that I am listening to you myself. And but also, Denver, as much as we are radical and we don't mince our words in the streets, when you get to State House, when you see the president, his stature and the presence of His Excellency, the former president.
It's presidential.
It's presidential. So you are also not going to be speaking necessarily how you would normally speak. So that allowed the young people who were there to engage the president meaningfully, and most of their recommendations were implemented in that ministers were tasked to engage these young people and listen to what was in the manifesto. And the young people got to explain these different demands to the ministers that were responsible for implementing them. And we saw the implementation of such recommendations. But also just touching on, for example, the work integrated learning issue. We now see Cabinet took a decision last year to ensure that this is implemented in our private sector and also in government. There's a will policy that is being driven by the Ministry of Higher Education. But also government is saying, we have been assured, because we've also been driving it as much as it was the legacy of our former president. We've still been driving it, and we've still been engaging government. We've been assured that government is going to put money aside to subsidize those private institutions that are going to take on students to do work integrated learning. This is just one example of many of the examples that show that President Geingob listened and he wanted to hear what young people were saying.
In the words of Dr. Veronica Tron, technical advisor in the office of former First Lady Monica Kengos, a whole entire president, as young people would say. Of course, we saw visuals just now of President Phil Ramaphosa leaving. He arrived in the capital earlier today to pay tribute to President Geingob. Esther, I would like us to flesh that out. Luciano just touched on it now. What are the initiatives in terms of policy that we saw being given birth to during the time of President Geingob's tenure that certainly was focused on youth and enterprise development with the aim of uplifting young people and their living standards?
All right. Before I even look at the social impact, I would want to draw it closer to education as a whole. We've seen that around with President Geingob leading this country, there has been a consistent increase in terms of the funding that has been given towards the education space. And coming from a student background, that alone was a victory for the student constituency. That alone was one of the initiatives that we always felt very included, because we've all known that President Geingob was a believer of education per se. Then you look in terms of what, through the office of Desiree, the youth advisor to the president, there's been so many initiatives that has been driven to support and assist young people. We've seen that there's been a high unemployment rate in the country, but that alone it was not unnoticed. It was continuously seen, and there's been so much effort being driven, where most of the times you find statements being thrown around that young people need to be job creators as opposed to job seekers. But with President Geingob's legacy, or rather a workspace, he ensured that that was accompanied by a practical support and practical assistance, where young people had a platform to apply for small grants. Young people had different platforms to even just be assisted within their small businesses, that then translated to them being able to be job creators in their small spaces in their own right. But just to enlarge on that is to say that that goes without saying how attentive of a president we had, that ensured that within all the policies and directives in his office, he ensured that young people were at the center stage, and they also got the much needed support from his office.
Thank you. Luciano, which other policy initiatives that stand out for you?
I think I would just reflect on last year. So when the results came out of the grade, in 2022, when the 2022 results came out of the NSS and O ordinary level, we released a statement as a student organization, and President reached out and he said, I am hearing what you are saying, and there's a crisis. Please come to State House. I want to engage you and to hear from you. What are the recommendations that you want to give to the education sector to improve what we are seeing now? We came together and we put together a document with short-term interventions and long-term interventions. We went to His Excellency. We spoke to him, and it was off the record meeting where we were just engaging him and telling him, this is really what needs to happen. We are not able to go to the minister now and tell the minister, do this and do that, but through you, perhaps these can be implemented. And we are really happy to say that most of the recommendations that we gave to the president were implemented, and we've seen an improvement in the results of the ordinary level and AS level performance last year. So even there, we came to the president and we said, look, we need more classrooms were built. We need more training to be given to teachers. Teachers have also now undertaken...
Particularly those AS level teachers.
Yes. And we gave a lot of recommendations, but most of them, maybe just one or two that haven't been implemented. We said institutions of higher learning must come up with bridging courses to bring those that, especially for the next 2 or 3 years, just to accommodate those learners that were not able to reach the competencies that are required to enter institutions of higher learning. Those programs have been implemented. We are still fighting on a few issues there, but the president ensured that most of our recommendations were implemented by the responsible bodies.
Esther, what I'm hearing the Vice President say is that NANSO is a serious organization that is being taken seriously, and that certainly was taken seriously but by the former president.
Indeed it is. And just to reflect on that, how serious the head of state took the relevance of NANSO is how he continuously ensured that he engaged us, he listened to us, and he implemented in terms of advice, in terms of policy positions that we would present to him. But not only did he only listen to us, he enabled NANSO to have room and to have a seat at the table, starting with the high-level panel, which I had the honor and privilege, which is something I'll take or I'll keep for a lifetime, to serve on a group of 22 advisors, to be the only young person coming from the student constituency. But that's because His Excellency believed in the strength that NANSO as an organization carried, and he wanted the voice to be seen through that. Then it translates further to the youngest deputy minister, being a former leader of NANSO. In terms of the time of her appointment, she's just been fresh out of the executive. Then we look at the appointment of That's now Honorable Emma Theophilus. We look at the appointment of Honorable Patience Masua, who was also the Secretary General of the organization, and many other young people, many other youth leaders that President Geingob empowered, appointed, and enabled to have a seat at the table, not only for them to just represent themselves, but to represent the constituency of students as well as young people across board. But even so, that goes to show that as a head of state, he listened to the young people. He made sure that there was practical implementation of their engagement and involvement at the decision-making table. It goes to say that tokenism wasn't part of his style of leadership. He was one that valued young people, that involved them, and many have described him to have an eye for talent. President Geingob will see that, I need this one here, because he sees that there's potential, there's capacity. And maybe just to share a little bit of light, when I was appointed on the high-level panel, President Geingob saw me on an NBC program. That time it was one-on-one. The next morning he called and he said, why are you young people arguing? At the time, I'm like, okay, who's this trying to be funny, imitating the president? And later I said, no, it's Geingob. How many African leaders do we have, or even global leaders, takes their cell phone out of their very busy schedule to call one, what I would describe, a mere student leader? But President Geingob didn't see us as mere just young people that are part of his country. He saw us as equal potentials, equal citizens that could have a seat at the table, equally contribute, share. He didn't mind in terms of age. Whether you are 22 years of age, whether you are 60, he would attentively listen to your advice and constructively engage you. But equally so, he just doesn't take what you say. He will debate with you. You need to stand your ground to make him understand what you're trying to say. But that is who he was.
I see you concurring, Luciano. Would you like to share with us a cherished memory that you have of engaging the president? Of course, we are commemorating the life and legacy of a statesman, of a seasoned diplomat, of someone who's respected not only domestically, not only on the continent, but certainly across the globe. But he was also a human being.
Yeah.
What is your fondest memory of engaging the late President Geingob?
I think it would be the first time that I met the president. That was in 2012. We were serving in Erongo region at the time, but we came...
In 2012 already?
Yes. Yeah. And we were sent to come and represent the region at the National Youth Week. We had an engagement at the Nampower Convention, and at the time, His Excellency was the Minister of Trade. He came, he joined he joined us at the engagement, but he didn't go sit at the high table. He came to sit in the crowd, and he came to sit next to me. So, in that time, oh my goodness, it's a minister sitting next to me. I'm just
your heart is racing in your chest, in your throat.
And then he said, he made I think 2 or 3 jokes during the program, and I didn't even know how to. Do you respond? Do you just laugh, or do you just look away? But what I can remember before getting to what I want to say of that encounter was, he smelled so good. He smelled so good, and he looked quite, eloquent. And then after the engagement, so he engaged the young people that day on business opportunities and how young people can use the opportunities that exist within the Ministry of Trade and Industrialization to further their businesses, etc. After the engagement, we stood outside, and he came to us and was like, short man. I was like, no, yes, honorable, how are you? Then we started debating about free education.
There outside the venue.
Yes, and we felt that at the time, only primary school was free. And secondary school was not yet free. And I said to His Excellency that it is in the Constitution. You have a provision in the Constitution that says government is going to provide free quality education for the Namibian child. Then he asked me, how much do you pay for your school fees? And I said, no, my school fees is currently $500 per annum. No, then it's free. It's free. What do you mean you're paying $500? Do you know how much it costs to take a child to school? I was like, no, but Your Excellency, the Constitution says we should not be paying anything.
Were you in primary school at the time, or high school?
I was in secondary school, yes.
Very well.
So we had a back and forth about, and I was standing on my point and trying to convince the honorable minister that education should be free. And he went to explain how they set up the education system back then, and how we are enjoying the fruits of the labor that they put in at the time, and it's really free. And I was a small boy who was defeated because he brought in all these figures, and he said, this is what we put into making sure that the learner can be in school. But we still went back and said it can't. We need to get free education. We still fought for, we still lobbied and did what we could within our region, but also at a national level in terms of free basic education.
In accordance with the supreme law of the land.
Yes,
Yeah.
because the constitution was clear.
Yes, yes. And he was the chairperson of the Constituent Assembly after all.
Yes.
Yeah. Esther, in as much as I hear the two of you say that the president listened and he implemented and that had impact, certainly as a student organization, you also had to listen. You also had to tweak.
Yes.
What role do you believe he played in helping NANSO not become stagnant, but remain an evolving organization and a platform that's responsive to the ever-evolving needs of young people in this country?
Very profoundly, I vividly recall when we took office in 2017, that time as a National Executive Committee, we decided that we are going to go on a regional restructuring to ensure that the organization is vivid and is visible across all the 14 regions. But firstly, we felt, you know what, as a leadership, we need to go meet the head of state to introduce ourselves and to ask for his support. Little did we know that we are going for close to an hour of radical engagement and deliberation to ask, but what is your relevance? So we went, and maybe just while I'm trying to answer this, I would also ponder on the first fond memory that I recall with His Excellency. And I boldly stood up introducing myself. Your Excellency, I'm Ester Simon, the president of NANSO. Then he interjected, no.
This country only has one president.
Yes. Well, you are a president, but with a small p. I'm the only president with a capital P.
Your Excellency with a small y and a small e.
Indeed,
Yeah.
indeed. He made sure that we understood the difference. So during that engagement, he asked to say that, can you contextualize the NANSO then, the NANSO of yesterday and the NANSO of now? What is the relevance of NANSO in an independent Namibia? How do you find yourself still relevant now? What is your fight currently? Because the NANSO of yesterday had identified its generational responsibility at the time and agenda. What is NANSO's agenda in the current time? Now, little did we know, we didn't do our homework so well when we went. So everyone was trying to say, no, we are fighting for free quality education. Then he asked, but what is free? What is quality? Can you contextualize that? Can you tell us how then you, that is the current leadership, is different from what we had then? Why should you still remain relevant? He gave us serious homework that day. We had to go back, then do the regional restructuring, make sure that there is equal representation from the grassroots level, from rural areas up until urban. But then importantly that year, we had to sit and craft what we call a student charter. That student charter, we had to make sure that we answer the critical questions and also explain what is the agenda of NANSO in an independent Namibia. How relevant are we as an organization? What is our mission? What is our vision? What are the policy positions that we have? We went back, proudly so, and he was very proud to receive our student charter. We had to explain what it means from the position of NANSO, what free quality education means in our context, but also he would ask, okay, how do we do it? Then we had a position as an organization, which was a resolution 16 that we adopted at the time. The natural resource of the country must pay, the fish must pay, the ocean must pay, everything must pay in terms of our mineral resources. But again, he tasked us, okay, I'm hearing you, but give me the policies. You know, give me the policy positions. Tell me how should we implement this. So that's how His Excellency shaped the relevance of an organization, by critically engaging the leadership and giving us tasks and homework, because you just don't chit-chat as an advocate or as an organization. You must come and tell him, this is what we are saying, Your Excellency, and this is how we are proposing it should be done. And he would really listen, provided that it's implementable.
And you can back it up.
Yes,
Yeah.
certainly.
Vice President Luciano with a lowercase v and a lowercase p. What is your take on the role that President Geingob played in helping, seeing to it that NANSO as an organization remains relevant in these times?
I think Esther covered it, but maybe just to add that he really implored even on us that we should not just be people who are receiving a platform, but we are not engaging our constituents. We are not coming with a mandate that is driven by what our people are saying. And when he came to our Congress in 2022, President said he was very happy that he could see the true representation of the Namibian people, because we had all our regions there. We had white learners and students there, which was also very, he said he was very happy to see that. We have included them as well, because most of the time student leaders in an African context don't really include
everyone.
So he was very happy that we have included everybody in what we were doing. And he implored on us and he tasked us to ensure that everything we do is driven by the needs of our constituents, and we are informed and we continuously engage the people on the ground, because it doesn't help that government is giving you a platform, but you're speaking for you, and you're not speaking as a person that is truly representing your constituents. So we've also continuously tried to put measures in place to ensure that we're engaging from the grassroots level up.
And it's very important to also be cognizant of your own privilege.
Yes.
And of the lens through which you view these matters.
Yes.
Yeah. Luciano, this past week we also heard that at times President Geingob was misunderstood. He was such a complex and layered figure. Young people often come under fire for not grasping matters on the ground, for not appreciating efforts. Would you say that young people did enough to try and understand the person that was Hage Geingob?
I'm going to say something a bit controversial.
We're here to hold space for you.
Yes. So I think young people perhaps didn't do enough homework to try and verify whatever information they were receiving. But I want to put the blame on our media houses particularly, used the press freedoms that President Geingob ensured that and continued to preach on, really sometimes in a manner that wasn't constructive. And there was always a sort of agenda, in my view, to make the president seem like an arrogant person, or seem like a person that doesn't want young people to have space, or he doesn't want to listen to young people. You would see a headline that says something, and then when you read the inside of that article, it's completely different or completely far from what the headline is saying. And young people, especially on social media, don't have the time to actually click on the link and go read the article.
Is that a justification to say that a young person does not have the time? And perhaps media literacy is also one of the challenges in this very country.
Yes.
And there's also a notion and a school of thought that says young people may have a lot of time, perhaps too much time, but they're not in the habit of reading.
Yes. Yes, and that's why I said that it's still on us as young people to ensure that we verify whatever we are getting, and we ensure that the information that we are taking in is truly holistic. But we don't do that. And I think President Geingob suffered the most because of that. Because most of the times, people did not take the time to even try and, even if it's a recording of him speaking, you don't even take the time to go and try and listen to the entire speech. You've heard that clip, and that's what you've taken as...
It serves the narrative that you want to push.
Yes.
Yeah, and you go ahead.
And you go ahead.
Yeah.
So I think generally, young people have a culture of not reading and
So what are
verifying.
you doing as a leader of young people to get them to read, to get them to be mindful and cognizant of the holistic context, and to engage whatever it is that they consume in terms of the news as well, responsibly?
I think we've tried. We had when the Access to Information Bill was being discussed in the regions, NANSO was one of the youth organizations that was leading those consultations, of course, together with the relevant stakeholders. So we were also using that platform to ensure, because we went to all the regions, we ensured all our regional structures participated in the Access to Information Bill discussions, and we held our own discussions at the regional level, and ensured that our young people also came, the learners in schools also came and understood that they have a responsibility as much as they have a right to access information.
Esther, what is your stance? Did young people do enough to familiarize themselves with the work that is being done by the likes of NANSO to engage the president and what open door policy he maintained consistently until the very end to see to it that young people and their issues are sufficiently prioritized?
I would like to respond to this with twofold. All right, you have a bunch of scholars that, in the shape of young people, that would go an extra mile to understand until the depth of that given discussion for them to be able to even allude or to respond to it. But then you find a generation of keyboard warriors who are or just on social media to constantly drive negative agendas. And that has sort of shaped how many young people also have a look on some of these things, where you would find that some don't really go an extra mile to understand the context, to even read between the lines to see the agenda or notion being pushed. And I think this is where it calls upon all of us to have a collective push to drive a much more of a positive drive in this country.
And by the way, sorry for the interjection, those keyboard warriors with that specific agenda that you just alluded to are not all young people. They're young people too, but they're not only young people.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. They're not only young people, and unfortunately you would find young people being caught up in some of these battles, being pushed towards a certain agenda to fight battles that are not ours. And there's one important question I remember at the 2022 Congress that His Excellency pondered on. What is your generational agenda? What is your generational mission? Which I think is a question he left us up until today that we need to respond to. We need to understand collectively as this current generational, what is our mission? What is our agenda? And how do we as a collective help Namibia and her people, as the young people of this country, to push this agenda? Theirs was to liberate this country. What is ours today? Apart from being keyboard warriors, pushing negative, construed agendas, what are we doing as young people to save this country?
I'm very tempted to say, preach, former president, preach. Luciano, but I think that's a question that we need to deal with as best as we can right now. It's certainly a complex and a layered question, and one that will take a number of sessions to unpack. And of course, it's not a stagnant question, it's certainly not a stagnant answer, but from where you are at, what is it that drives young people? Are young people focused enough to even realize what drives them? Is there something that drives them?
I think there is a lot of young people would definitely want better for themselves. A lot of young people definitely want better for this country. I think there's just a lot that's happening that isn't necessarily good, that clouds the entire atmosphere. There's high unemployment rates, there's crises that come over and over again, health and educational crises. And when these things happen, because the atmosphere is saying, why we are all focused on being negative, there's nobody, or there's very few that are trying to say, okay guys, this is happening, how do we move past this? How do we move on? How do we create the environment that we want? How do we create the Namibia that we want? What platforms are there that exist now? Can we use to amplify our voices, but also to amplify our vision for this country? While it's not just on young people, it's also on office bearers in institutions and in government to ensure that young people understand that they do have platform, and there is hope at the end of the very, very dark tunnel.
You have to acknowledge it's difficult to believe that there is hope.
Yes.
If I spent X number of years at a tertiary institution, Ester, and I attained my qualification, and here I am with that qualification in this country as a young person, and I don't have a job, and
Yes.
I apply for jobs on a daily basis. I either see the Luciano and Esters of the world. They have a seat at these tables. They make the sounds that they do make, yet it doesn't translate into tangible action for me yet
Yes.
to improve my circumstances. So it's difficult to let such a young person believe and hold on to this hope. And it brings me to the question, Esther, we do know that President Geingob paved the way and set the bar very high, and that a responsibility vests in all of us to complete the assignment and see it through. But in the meantime, having heard the challenges that Luciano also flagged in terms of high levels of unemployment amongst young people, what would you say to young people to see and find and discern hope amidst turbulent waters during this time especially?
Okay. It's quite challenging times and trying times, which are hard for all of us as a nation. Even much more for a young person, probably right now sitting in the deepest part of this country, being the rural area, that might not have access to even this platform because she or he doesn't have electricity, she doesn't have access to internet, doesn't have access to even a television. But at some point, she had access to an education. But what I draw from is the stories of so many Namibians that grow from nothing to something. And as we are reflecting and paying tribute to His Excellency also came from humble beginnings. He was a son of farm workers. And that gave me so much hope to say that even those of us coming from trying backgrounds, coming from backgrounds that doesn't offer us as much as others are coming from, we still can dream of becoming head of states. We still can dream of becoming ministers, deputy ministers, and any other corporate space that we may dream to be part of. So my advice would be that let us remain strong, even if it's difficult. But we've seen that even through the calibers that were exhibited by our head of state, he had strength. He had resilience. He went through so much as a head of state. He led this country through a lot of crises, whether drought, whether COVID, whether economic downturns. But what do we learn from him? Apart from being just a head of state, what we learn from him as a human being, as a father and as a mentor, is that he never lost hope for a better and a prosperous Namibia. And that we as young people of this country should hold on to. But not only hold on to and sit firmly and do nothing about it, but equally strive to find means, even if it's difficult, through the resilient nature of being Namibians, find means to equally contribute. It's difficult, yes, we acknowledge that, but we need to try and try a little bit harder, even just to make him proud.
John and Madam Desiree Ubal earlier described President Geingob as a lover of life. We saw the videos being recirculated this past week of him dancing with school children, how much fun he had, how much fun they had. What would you like to say about that aspect of his personality?
I think it reminds me of the 2019 presidential campaigns. President would arrive driving the Jeep, and then he would get out of the Jeep, and then he just starts dancing, and the crowd would go crazy. I think the president loved, engaging young people.
As we can see on the screen at the moment, yeah.
He loved just, even if you were, the one day we were at Kasarasalia during the campaigns, and he was dancing and he kept going the whole night. He was like, no, dance, let's go. Oh, you young people, I don't want to sleep so early. So it's I think he really was a jovial person. He was a charming guy, and he loved dancing. I think we can see from the clips how he's dancing to Female Donkey's song. My favorite was when he was dancing with Gaza on stage. I think all of us were so caught up in that moment, because also the crowd was so big. For those that were there, you saw how President would arrive and everybody was happy to see him. Everybody was so excited to engage him, because also he was running around and walking with the people. Yeah.
Esther, what is your take on that aspect of his personality? A lover of life and of things.
Indeed, a lover of life, but also a very relatable human being who never allowed the title head of state or president of the country to limit him from his people. Every individual from all walks of life had access to him. And sometimes I reflect, having had a real opportunity to travel around, you don't come as close to head of states as we come as close to our head of state.
Never, forever. Yeah.
Whether in Africa or even in other parts of the world, you don't. But in this country, we had a rare opportunity of a leader who was relatable, who would come to his people at any given time. We've seen clips of him not only dancing, but even just taking a normal walk on the beach, where he would go to a random restaurant without securities and he would sit down. I remember of a vivid memory once in Swakopmund at Catholic church on a Sunday morning. Ordinary Swakopmunders went to church and there was no protocol, there were no police officers.
In Mondesa?
Yes, in Mondesa.
Yeah.
And we all sat down. No one knew. He went and sat in the middle. No one knew, apart from probably the people that were sitting next to him, that he was in the church.
Wow.
The sermon went on, everything happened. Only when church was out, the pastor said, no, may we all rise for His Excellency to leave first. The church went crazy. But that went to show the type of leader that he was.
The house of God went crazy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Reachable, accessible, lovable, but most importantly, he allowed anybody to have access to him. He would stand and listen. He would stand and speak. But equally so, invite you for a dance.
Luciano, I don't know whether I'm allowed to say what should we as young people, I'm probably not young enough anymore to say that, but what should you as young people do to firstly, of course, honor the legacy of President Geingob, but to capacitate it, to see to it this assignment that vests in all of us does get completed with dignity, but certainly also with urgency, knowing our socioeconomic background?
I think it's to, like Esther said, be resilient and believe really that, as President said in his New Year's message, the country's economy is going to see an uprise. It's going to see good headwinds going forward. And we must be prepared to take up those opportunities when they come, but also to contribute to nation building. I think a lot of us are not as patriotic as we should be. And I think there is a call on all of us to do a patriotic thing, one small patriotic thing in our day-to-day lives, one way or another.
Thank you. Your Excellency, former President, with lowercase letters, all of them.
Indeed.
Your final thoughts this afternoon before we let you go.
Mine is most probably just to reflect on the kind of president that we had and the legacy that he leaves behind and what our collective responsibility as young people would be. We have lost a head of state, a statesman, a mentor and a friend to young people, a leader who never judged anyone based on class or age, but listened attentively to all of us. Many described him as a gentle giant, and also at our level as young people, we had so many names for him. Ahaba, Hagelolo, our prohibited president, so many. But maybe it's to allude onto all of us that as we remember him, we must constantly be reminded of the principles that he stood for, the hopes and visions that he had for this country, and to carry them forward. We have a responsibility on our shoulders to ensure that we don't let die what he started in this country. And a call onto our leaders maybe is to imitate the kind of leadership style that he had. Most importantly, the reassurance that he gave the young people of this country, because we started seeing in his leadership young people coming closer to the table, young people feeling more free to express themselves. Even on social media, he would take something from there and try to see where we can implement it. Let us not shy away from the changing times and be more attentive to the means and platforms that young people feel to express themselves freely and listen also on those given platforms. But most importantly, his legacy will surely live on, and it is our collective responsibility to pave that. It's a tough time, and these are difficult words, but so long, Comrade President, so long.
Thank you so much, Madam. I'm very worried that Luciano will go onto social media, express concern for not having been given the opportunity for some final thoughts of its engagement. So please, let me indulge.
No, I think I've said as much as I could. May his soul rest in revolutionary peace.
Tapandulonine, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing with us your experience working alongside the late President, and our condolences also to you.
Thank you, Denver. Condolences to all of us.
Yes. There you have it. Current NANSO Vice President, Luciano Kambala, as well as Madam Ester Simon, former NANSO President, talking to us about their experience of the man that was Hage Geingob. Now, President Geingob also attended the Africa Youth Connect Summit in the Rwandan capital, Kigali, in 2022. We will now listen to what he had to say at that platform.
President of the Republic of Rwanda, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, young people of Africa, the future of Africa is in your hands. Thus, I am delighted to have been accorded this opportunity to participate at this year's Youth Connect Africa Summit, convening under the theme, quote unquote, accelerating investment in youth, resilient Africa. Indeed, the Youth Connect Africa Summit, first hosted in Kigali in 2017, has grown into a formidable event for the young people of Africa. Therefore, let me thank my dear brother, President Paul Kagame, for having invited me to be part of this experience. As you know, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the past 2 years have been extremely difficult. However, we believe that in every crisis lies an opportunity. Therefore, the COVID-19 pandemic has allowed us to strengthen our health systems through innovations in science and technology. Moreover, by uniting to fight the common enemy of COVID-19, bonds of solidarity and social cohesion were consolidated, which gives us a perfect opportunity to accelerate investments in our young people as part of our efforts to realize the vision of Agenda 63, the Africa we want. In this information age, young Africans are more integrated and connected than at any stage in our continent's history, owing to improved access to the internet and mobile telephony. Digital channels and social media have resulted in an intensification of actors and the rise of second-rate diplomacy. Therefore, young people of Africa should embrace the fourth industrial revolution as part of the economic transformation of the continent. I'm confident that efforts will continue across all African Union member states to enhance youth participation and inclusion through representation at all levels of decision-making. Namibia is deep into its demographic window of opportunity, which opened to us in early 1990s. In order to harness the demographic dividend, the Namibian government is in the process of implementing a cross-cutting national youth policy, which incorporates youth development programs. The overall goal of the policy is to ensure that young Namibians are empowered and become self-reliant and become productive citizens through improved education, health, and economic outcomes, as well as increased political participation. Conscious efforts have been made to include young people in the political decision-making process, with the youngest member of parliament, who is at age 22, and a deputy minister I appointed in 2020 at age 23. There are other young people who are members of parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, based on the principles of solidarity, unity, and collaboration, which are core ethos of this initiative, Namibia decided to subscribe to the Youth Connect Africa program in May 2022, becoming the 28th member state to do so. Collaboration across African Union member states through various instruments, including African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, will greatly enhance the economic strength of Africa in the global economy. I have often stated, through a quote from Professor Joseph Tischli, that growth that is not shared will not be sustainable. Development and information should therefore be cascaded using technology as an enabler to reach and benefit all members of our societies, specifically young people at the grassroots and rural communities. The premium that I continue to place on youth inclusion, empowerment, and development is not merely a political rhetoric. It should translate into effective governance and sustainable development. Young people must actively participate and be meaningfully engaged in our Agenda 2063 developmental aspirations. Young Africans, you are the hope and future of our great continent. Your countries and governments are relying on your individual and collective contributions in order to realize the vision of a prosperous and peaceful Africa. This is a time to uphold an enduring value of solidarity. This is the hour to extend empathy and spread hope. This is the hour to provide the drive and direction needed to establish the Africa we want. I thank you.
Those were the words of the late President Hage Geingob at the Africa Youth Connect Summit in Rwanda in 2022, talking to us about the importance of leveraging the youth dividend.